Welcome to the Motherhood Alliance podcast, the podcast dedicated to empowering moms and families on their health and wellness journey. I'm Brittany Suttner.
And I'm Drea Brit. Together, we're here to explore holistic approaches that go beyond conventional medicine.
Each week, we dive into topics that matter most to you. Everything from nutrition and mental health to alternative therapies and natural living.
And whether you're a new mom navigating the early stages of parenthood or a seasoned pro looking for new ways to support your family's well-being, you're in the right place.
Even better, all of our guests are local small business owners who you can actually talk to and work with. You can learn more about today's guest and connect with hundreds of other health and wellness professionals through our informative and easy-to-use directory at motherhoodalliance.com.
Before we get started, keep in mind that this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for personal healthcare advice. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any changes based on the podcast content.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Are you ready to help your family thrive? Let's get started. Hi, we are Britt and Drea from motherhoodalliance.com, and we are excited to welcome some guests that many of you have asked for more information about, ourselves. In many past episodes, we've referred to our history as prenatal and postpartum personal trainers through our business, Fit Moms on the Move, and how a career in that field ultimately led us to starting the Motherhood Alliance. In these 4 episodes, we dive into numerous topics related to navigating fitness before and after pregnancy, navigating the pressures of society, ab and pelvic floor function, how to have a fast postpartum recovery, what to do if you are years postpartum and your abs feel weak, and more. So without further ado, welcome to today's conversation with us, Drea and Britt.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 4 of the Motherhood Alliance podcast with me and Brittany with Fit Moms on the Move. In this episode, we're going to talk about during pregnancy, how to prepare for that optimal postpartum recovery even before baby is born. I know for me, if I had known this stuff before my kids were born, that would have been a game changer. And that's part of why we do what we do, is because we want to help other moms get an understanding of what their bodies are going through and how it affects their postpartum recovery and beyond. So I'm going to kick it off with a question to you, Brittany. So why is it important for moms to prepare for their postpartum, not just for labor and delivery?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head with so many women are just focused on the labor and delivery piece. I mean, they're focused on this hopefully less than 24-hour experience.
Hopefully, yeah.
And depending on where they're at in their pregnancy, but they dwell on it for 9 months.
And it is
and
important.
You do need to prepare for birth. And trust us, there are some tips we could give you for birth in a whole different episode on just positioning and things like that when it comes to helping your pelvic floor be ideal and all this other stuff. It is important. So I don't want to discount that. However, very few women are really focused on their recovery after birth. They're just focused on getting through pregnancy and birth and prepping for the baby. But let's prep for you after birth. And so why is it important? Well, let's be honest. After baby is born, it can be really hard to prioritize yourself. Yeah. Right? And it's a really foggy season. Like, you're just surviving.
Yeah. If you've had kids, you know it's a fog. After baby's there, it doesn't matter how many kids you've had. It's just like, you can't think right. You can't think straight. You're not sleeping well. It's just, you can't think of anything except, surviving. And so how amazing would it be that you kind of already have a plan in place and that you've already prepared during pregnancy?
Yeah, you're mentally prepared. So then all you have to do is just execute it. You already know what to expect. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about fitness specifically in pregnancy and giving you some tips for different trimesters, things like that. But before we get into the fitness side of things, what can pregnant moms do to support their physical recovery ahead of time? Like, what can you actually do during pregnancy to help set yourself up for success?
Yeah, I would say the very first thing would be to get educated. And just a plug here, because we know how important that is, we designed a course called Prepared for Postpartum, preparing for your 4th trimester, basically, during pregnancy. You want to have a postpartum recovery plan, and the best thing you can do is just be willing to learn, right? You also want to get your spouse on board. So you have time to execute it, before pregnancy and after.
And then I also think having intention in your workouts is going to be important too, because we mentioned this in a prior episode, but it's a mindset that can feel really empowering if once you find out you're pregnant, no matter what you're doing in your fitness realm at the time, if your mindset can shift to, all right, I'm now training for birth and recovery.
Right.
Like I have something to train for here. And then even though that can feel daunting, especially for a first-time mom, thinking about how beautiful it is that after baby is born, you have the opportunity to completely reset your foundation of your
exciting,
body.
Actually.
And you get this whole chance to do it right.
Right.
So no matter what bad posture habits you've collected through college and all of these other experiences of your life, after you have your babies, these are great opportunities to kind of reset your body because you have this relaxin hormone in your body that's making it more loosey-goosey. You can have, there's just a lot more education around restoring your foundation in this season of life. And so if you do it right, you can really set yourself up well, not only for future pregnancies, but for the rest of your life.
Right. We want you to have confidence too. It really comes down to that, is a lot of women don't have the confidence in themselves. Like, am I doing things right? What if I do this wrong? What if I do that? You know, you really, if you educate yourself during pregnancy on that postpartum recovery and what that actually should look like, that's like smooth sailing. Again, I can't imagine having this kind of information when I had my kids. It would have been a game changer.
Yeah. And that's why we felt like it was so important, is because we didn't have it.
Right.
And so we rode the struggle buses and we really wanted to make it easier for moms going forward. But so let's talk about fitness a little bit, prenatal fitness. How can prenatal fitness and being active in pregnancy support a smoother postpartum recovery? And what would you say a woman should focus on during pregnancy?
Yeah. So, I mean, really the ultimate goal for, all of this is that you want an easier birth and an easier postpartum recovery. So really, when it comes down to it, you're training for both of these experiences, like you've said. So, I mean, when it comes to the benefits, you have less chance for gestational diabetes. You actually have 30% chance less risk for preeclampsia in those who exercise at least an hour to an hour and a half or so of minutes per week. And that's splitting it up. It's not like you have to, do it all at once. That's not a lot, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So even just doing a little bit, and like we've talked about before, walking, simple strength training, stretching, being intentional about your strength training, that's going to make all the difference in the world when it comes to that postpartum recovery. It also means that, you start exercising if you're not already right now. So if you haven't been doing a whole lot, that doesn't mean it's too late. Sometimes you read like, well, if you haven't been exercising, you probably shouldn't start now.
Yeah. Or don't increase your exercise.
Yeah.
Just maintain what you've been doing. Well, if you've been doing nothing.
Right. You know what? You're not broken. You're pregnant and your baby needs you to move. So even if that means that, guess what? You haven't been walking, start just walking. Walk around your block. Then start increasing it throughout the weeks, throughout the months. Yeah, maybe you start waddling a little bit and things won't be feeling so good, but it's still, you're making a big difference for yourself and your baby.
Mm-hmm. And I know that there are some circumstances where people have high risk pregnancies or some things might be different, but in general, like, this is not a sickness.
Right.
This is an empowering time of life. And so we need to look at it that way.
Yeah.
So let's talk about each trimester. What are some things to focus on or maybe even avoid in each trimester and even the whole pregnancy as a whole? Yeah.
So throughout, all your trimesters, and I'll break it down a little bit here too, but you really want to focus on your posture and your breath work. And I know we talk a lot about that in our courses and even in our YouTube videos as well, but posture and breath work in all the different movements of your life is going to be foundational throughout all the trimesters. So when it comes to the first trimester, it's usually, you want to do less ups and downs. So dizziness can be common as your blood volume increases, and you want to be aware that your relaxin is also increasing. So kind of, avoiding a lot of jumpy kind of motions. If you like running and it's really not starting to feel good, or if you start to feel a little different, that might be your sign to start, slowing that down a little bit. For the most part, moms can continue to run throughout their first trimester, but you really just need to listen to your body as well. And that would also be a big theme throughout all of them as well. So, just continue to do what you love. Sometimes moms feel really sick in that first trimester. If that means you need to take a break for a while, that's okay. In the second trimester, this is when you really need to start paying attention to the pressure. So when I talk about pressure, that's kind of like that pelvic floor pressure. You really want to think about focusing on that intentional strength training and balance work. And when you do the strength training, focus again on that glute strength, back, chest expansion, and focus on the deep core. So in the second trimester, most women start to feel better. They don't have the sickness and they're starting to feel good. We aren't going to hold you back from anything in particular. I mean, don't do skydiving and all that kind of crazy stuff, or, go skiing on the lake or whatever, but really just do the things that you love to do and be reasonable about it. Right.
And can we hit pause right there for just a second and dive into that pressure piece just a little bit? Because I know we've been talking about breathing and pressure, and we'd need a whole nother episode to dive really into it. But when you're talking about pressure, it's really, think about as baby is growing, they're taking up space inside of your abdominal cavity. And so when there's not a baby in your body, when you bring air in on an inhale, there's plenty of space for that air to go. So you could kind of dictate where you push that air. You could breathe with your shoulders by lifting your shoulders and allowing that air to go upward. You could really focus on your ribs expanding and letting the air go in your ribs. You could push that air down into your belly and feel your belly kind of move. So when there's no baby in your body, play with it. Kind of see where your air naturally goes and where you can have control to put that air. But then once baby is filling up that space, now the air has to go somewhere, and it'll go somewhere of least resistance.
Right.
So if you have weak abdominals, that air might go into your abdominals and put pressure on, or maybe even help make that diastasis worse, right? So we talked about diastasis in our prior episode. Or maybe that pressure goes down onto your pelvic floor, and so you feel more pressure on your pelvic floor. So I just wanted to hit pause there and explain a little bit about what you meant by pressure, because especially as you're getting into third trimester, when you're inhaling, that air has to go somewhere.
Right.
And that's what's going to indicate if something is maybe too much for you or if you can still handle it, is if you can control the pressure.
Right. I mean, and that's, like you say, we could go into a whole nother episode about breathing and pressure and all that stuff. But just a general rule of thumb is learning how to expand that rib cage and really bringing that air in and into the rib cage, not into the shoulders, not down onto the pelvic floor. Kind of training yourself to have full rib expansion is ideal. And just doing that throughout your pregnancy as much as you can, up into the point where you're really pregnant and it's really hard to not do that. But that's where that habits start establishing, because once baby comes, once you can start learning, or once you can start reconnecting with your core, your pelvic floor, and just breathing well again, that's where that postpartum recovery is going to be. You're going to see the results of breathing optimally during pregnancy into that postpartum recovery.
Yeah. And you mentioned for second trimester, the strength training and the balance piece. And this is first trimester. A lot of people feel just sick.
Yeah.
Not everyone, most people, a lot of people. I did. I never had extreme nausea, but it was just that queasy feeling. Third trimester, you definitely still want to have movement, but it can get more challenging, and we'll touch on that in a second. But that second trimester is really, if you're focusing on training for the birth and the postpartum time frame, like, this is your time, baby. Like, this is when you can really work intentionally in your strength training and balance. Yeah. But then in third trimester, I don't think we touched on that yet.
Not yet.
Yeah. A lot of people say avoid lying on your back, and for good reasons. Some people, they can get that vena cava compressed and it can cause them some dizziness and issues, but really this is person dependent.
Yeah.
So just pay attention to your own body. And if you are doing some strength training and you want to do a bench press and you lay down on your back in the third trimester and you're not having any issues, it might be okay for you just based on where the baby is positioned, things like that. Otherwise, you can make it more of an incline bench press and just make some modifications.
There's always modifications, and it's not always listening to the internet or whatever saying, do not do this. You're not, it's likely going to be fine. If you're on your back, even if we're doing, crunches or something and doing them well with good posture and, breathing. But if you're doing something on your back on the floor, even if it's just for a minute or two, it's probably going to be fine. But again, listen to your body. If you're starting to feel dizzy, roll to your side and do some, sit up slowly and do something different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing that a lot of people don't think about in third trimester, though, is our hips and pelvic pain can become semi-common in pregnancy. And it makes sense, right? Where our hips are holding a lot of weight. They're having to splay from the relax, and there's just a lot of stuff going on. So one tip we do have for you is, if you are having some SI joint instability or pain, or you just want to really avoid it, is just be cautious with single-sided exercises. And when I say that, I mean like one-legged exercises. So a lunge might be fine for you because you're able to keep your hips steady and level. But something like a single-legged deadlift where you're really lifting up that back leg and letting it float, all of your weight is going into one hip. And so that could potentially cause you some triggers.
It's unlikely you'd be able to maintain that stability in your hip. So if you find that you're dipping your hip a lot, even in a lunge, that's probably not going to be the thing for you to do. Either you need to slow it down and really focus on getting those hips level, or finding something else different that can support the glute work that you're trying to do.
Yeah. And then like we talked about in second trimester, that's a great time frame for strength training. If you can still strength train in the third trimester, fantastic. Keep doing that if you can. But a really big focus in third trimester is going to be hip mobility and just keeping mobility throughout your body, as well as keeping that transverse abdominal and that pelvic floor connection. So in our prior episode, again, we've said it a few times, make sure you go back and listen to that one. It's really helpful in understanding this episode here. But those deep core muscles tend to turn off, as well as our pelvic floor tends to start clenching and getting a little overactive because it's constantly supporting weight of the baby. So those muscles specifically can really start to develop some habits if you're not staying intentional on making sure that they can both strengthen and relax. So great thing to focus on in the third trimester. Okay, so focusing in still on during pregnancy, what can we be doing to set ourselves up for success? What kind of postpartum plan should moms have in place before baby arrives?
So whether that's a plan, a program that you use through us, or if it's through somebody else, or if you're working on a plan for yourself, you want to have one that focuses on reestablishing those optimal breathing patterns and reactivating the transverse abdominals. So you really want to focus on establishing your core control along with your breath, and then understanding how your posture really affects your movement patterns and your habits throughout every day, even in simple things, lifting up something heavier, lifting up a car seat, reaching up high into, the cupboards. All these different movement patterns matter. So really thinking about that postpartum plan and practicing while you're pregnant. You want to start one with the foundation. So foundations are key to setting your body up for the next pregnancy and for the rest of your life. Again, when we talk about foundations, we're talking about that deep core connection, pelvic floor control, and that breathing pattern. And like I said, you don't have to go through us, but we do already have a postpartum recovery guide ready for you to grab. Even during pregnancy, you can start reviewing that ahead of time and just starting to learn what steps to take during that fourth trimester, the first 12 weeks of your postpartum recovery and beyond.
Yeah. And we've also mentioned we're moms ourselves at this time of the recording. I have a 9 and 7-year-old, and Drea has an 11 and 9-year-old.
Yeah, crazy.
I think. Is that right? Yeah. I mean, they're definitely in the school age now, but Drea, what is one piece of advice that you wish someone had told you before you had your first baby? Because I know for me, man, I feel like you don't know until you experience it. But I really didn't feel like myself for a long time. Like I really felt like I lost who I was.
Yeah.
In transparency until my kids were probably at least 3. Like my youngest was 3. Not saying I couldn't function and I was like totally not myself in any way, but it's just feeling peaceful and some of the being able to have interests that I had prior to pregnancy.
Having space for yourself.
Yeah, having space. And I feel like if someone would have told me that and just letting me know like, hey, that's okay to feel that way, that would have just helped me set up my mindset a little bit. And just knowing that even though like in that example, 3 years can feel like a long time, it really is a short season in our life.
Yeah. It's precious too. And there's tough times too, but it's precious.
What would you say?
I would say, that advice would have been very helpful for me too. I would say that having access to a directory like the Motherhood Alliance, or having access to people who should be in my support corner right away before actually the baby was born would have been super helpful. There was so much I struggled with. I did not have any friends that were moms at the time, when I had my kids. So I had to look up everything on my own, and we all know how Google is. Like, we all know how that is. So if I was able to establish care with a pelvic floor PT, with lactation, with, chiropractic, all these other things before I had my first child, I would have been set up for success so much better. And even if I didn't use their services completely, or, didn't need full access, I would have already established that relationship, and I would feel probably more confident in all of that. I know with my first kiddo, breastfeeding was a challenge, and maybe he had tongue tie. With the second kiddo, I knew what tongue tie was, and I was able to get somebody in there right away, and that made a huge difference. So again, you don't know what you don't know, but why not set yourself up for success before it all happens? So that, and that's why we started Motherhood Alliance, is it derived a lot from that mindset.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is why we've started these things.
Yeah.
This is why we've put programs together. This is why we started the Motherhood Alliance, is because we've ridden the struggle bus ourselves, and we just want to help other women not have to go through things that we've gone through. And we've learned so much from our prenatal and postpartum education type stuff that we just want to share it with people. And so I know Drea mentioned it earlier in this episode, but I do want to touch on a program specifically for women who are pregnant. It's called Prepared for Postpartum. You can find this on our website, which is fitmomsonthemove.com. But this is a very extensive course helping to educate women proactively on what they can do during pregnancy to help minimize postpartum dysfunction. So everything you've heard in all 4 of these episodes, including everything in the prior episode about relaxin and ab separation and rib flare and TAs turned off, as well as everything in this episode talking about fitness during pregnancy, what your postpartum plan can and should look like, everything is included in this prenatal course. So you can go on our website, learn more about that. And we do kind of have this Fit Mom flow for those of you who are in that trying to conceive or pregnancy season, where if you really just want to have to put in very little brain power of thinking about doing research.
Yeah, research.
We've basically done the research for you. And so if you want to learn more about that, I'll just kind of rattle it off here quickly, but the great flow that we would recommend for you is to go through the Prepared for Postpartum course during pregnancy, ideally around that second trimester, because then the information is fresh, even going into birth. However, you are still able to connect with those deep core muscles. They haven't gotten to a point of stretch where they're kind of turning off
Yeah, you
yet.
can practice and start establishing habits.
So ideally second trimester. And then our postpartum recovery guide is something you could start either right after birth, if that feels right for you. Remember, it's like 5 minutes a day, starts with some deep breathing. So very gentle. Or you could wait a few weeks after birth until you're ready to start with the postpartum recovery guide. And then we do have some Fitness Foundations 101 programs that you can go through, and that's really going to help you with core rehab and really getting that deep core reset and walking you through actual beginner level workouts to reestablish your form, your foundation, and everything like that, so that you can slowly build that foundation back up. I mean, that's kind of what we've been rattling through all 4 of these episodes, is rebuilding that foundation so that you can get back to doing what you love as quickly as possible. Yeah. So, Drea, do you have any final words of encouragement or advice for women who are, it could be really anything related to our 4 episodes together. Maybe someone who is currently pregnant or trying to conceive or just entering motherhood, or maybe is in the thick of motherhood right now.
I think the first thing I think of is you're doing a good job. Like, I'm going to tell you, you're doing a great job. You're listening to podcasts like this, and we don't have all the answers, but the fact is that you're trying to learn something new, that you're educating yourself, and that you're just doing the best you can, and that you keep learning, and that you are a great mom, and you're doing a great job. So keep doing it. Keep going through. Even if you're having rough times, it's one day at a time. And then someday you're going to be, looking at your 11-year-old wondering what the heck happened. And now he's doing crazy 11-year-old things. And it's just going to keep going. Different lifestyle, different seasons, right? So, and if you're going through that small little kid stuff, especially, I feel you, and I know that you're doing a great job.
Great advice. I love that. Thank you guys so much for joining us on these 4 episodes. We hope that you feel empowered, you feel educated from these episodes, but you also have a little bit of idea on our background and our entrepreneurship journey and our business that we originally started. And for those of you who are curious how we've gone from prenatal and postpartum training into creating the Motherhood Alliance, you can head back to episode number 1, the very first one on the Motherhood Alliance podcast, learn more about our journey there. But thank you so much for spending some time with us, and feel free to reach out at any time. For Fit Mom specifically, you can contact us through our social media or through our website, and we'll be back again soon with our next guest on the Motherhood Alliance podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider leaving a rating or review or sharing it directly with a friend who could benefit from the information? We know that you're a busy mom or caregiver, and our goal is to make your life easier by bringing tips and tricks directly from experts into your earbuds. By sharing this episode with someone you love, you can play a critical role in helping to make their life easier as well. We appreciate your time, and thank you for being a part of the Motherhood Alliance family.